Kakadosh Boker Tov. We're going to be continuing with Hilchot of Hachana from Shabbat to Chol, which is basically preparing ourselves from Shabbat to the weekday. What is permitted, what is prohibited. So the next few days we'll try to understand what exactly are the Hilchot. We'll start like this. It's prohibited to prepare something on Shabbat for the necessity of the weekday because it's considered a tilcha shelo letzorech Shabbat, which means we are toiling, we are doing some work which is not for the reason of the Shabbat. And therefore we're not allowed to come and to be misader, for example, to organize a room, which we're not going to be there towards the end of the Shabbat. Why? Because if we're now going to clean up a room and we're not even going to be there, it means that we are preparing from Shabbat to the weekday. So therefore it is going to be prohibited. And we're not allowed to. However, though, if we're going to be in that room and we are actually benefiting that the room in itself is going to be clean, so therefore we are allowed to actually even organize it towards the end of the Shabbat. But the fact that right now I like an organized room and I'm here, I'm not going to be somewhere else. I'm going to be in this room. So therefore, even though it's towards the end of the Shabbat, I could come and I can organize the room because I benefit in the fact that I have an organized room. That is to do with from Shabbat to Chol. Now, to do with on Shabbat in itself for the entire Shabbat, we're allowed to prepare from Shabbat to Shabbat, which means that it's not considered tilcha shelo letzorech, and therefore we could actually come and fold the clothing a few different times, as long as it's going to be for tzorech Shabbat, or for example, preparing the beds, or doing the beds. So you could come and you could do it, for example, you went to sleep on Friday night. So you, again, on Shabbat morning you come, and you prepare the bed nicely. Then you came to nets, you go home, you take another little tiny nap. Again, you could go, and then again after the lunch, again, you could do it 3 or 4 times. It does not matter, because since it's going to be for the necessity of the entire Shabbat, it's going to be permitted. There's no problem of Hachana within the Shabbat in itself from one time to another time. Now, one time which is going to be a little bit problematic is if a person did not prepare his clothing on before Shabbat Chazon, and now you have the Shabbat, right, Chazon, which is basically the Shabbat before Tisha B'Av. We know that according to Ashkenazim, they wear the same clothing. They are going to do everything for the 9 days. But according to Sfaradim, right, we do only Shavua Shechalbo. What is Shavua Shechalbo? The Shavua, the week that Tisha B'Av falls out on, that's when we're not allowed to take showers. We have to actually use clothing which are not newer and freshly laundered. It has to be already clothing which were already beforehand. So now it says over here like this: if a person did not prepare clothing before Shavua Shechalbo Tisha B'Av, it is prohibited to come on Shabbat and start wearing a whole bunch of different clothing, because it looks like you're doing Hachana from Shabbat to Chol. However, though, you're allowed to come and change your clothing all the times which anyway you would have done it otherwise. What does that mean? So for example, in order for me to come right now and every single half an hour to come and start changing clothing, even though there are matirim to do so, here, this is the psak of the Ben Ish Chai, Kaf HaChaim, and the Chazon Ovadia, that they actually come and all 3 of them, they come and they say that it is going to be prohibited. Why? Because if you come and you start changing your clothing every single half an hour, let's say Tisha B'Av falls out on a Thursday, so you've got, whether it's going to be Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you've got a lot of days over there. That's the full week. That's the maximum it could be for Shavua, Shechalbo Tisha B'Av. And a person did not prepare their clothing. So now if they're going to come and they're going to start changing every single half an hour their clothing in order to afterwards come and have clothing to change, it's going to be problematic. So therefore, why? Because it looks like you're doing Hachana. So what are you supposed to do? He says what you're allowed to do is you're allowed to change the times where you could have changed. Which means, for example, Friday night you come to the Bet Knesset, you come and you wear whether it's going to be your shirt, right? If right now on Shabbat morning you want to change, you could do that, because you could do that. Those are things which are done and it doesn't look like it's something of Hachana. Not every single half an hour, but from a Friday night to Shabbat morning, or from Shabbat morning to the Mincha, right, which again you're changing from Bigdei Shabbat to Shabbat, obviously, because we've spoken about this a lot of times, that Mincha of Shabbat is actually the highest level of the Shabbat, so we have to actually even be more careful about wearing Shabbat clothing during the time of Shabbat and Mincha, and not to wear weekday clothing or clothing which are more watered down. Remember that the Yanuchu Bam, right, that's the highest level of the Shabbat, when everything comes together of Yaakov Avinu, and we put them together in one of the highest levels, either way because of the time of the Mincha, or also because of the time of the Shabbat and Mincha is the highest level of the Shabbat. So a person should be very, very careful to wear Shabbat clothing during that time, But again, the concept is that if he's going to change from the Arvit to Shachrit and the Shachrit to Mincha, that's something normal. And therefore, since it's going to be something normal, you're allowed to do that in order to change. But to come and to start changing from one to another, for sure is going to be more problematic. I just wanted to finish by mentioning, please remember that today is Yom Shlishi of Parashat Beshalach, which is a very big segula, right? That we actually read the Parashat Aman, Shnai Mikra Ve'echad Targum, that we should understand that we actually believe that just like the Mishabur actually brings down that there was a minhag of doing it every single day. But even if a person doesn't do it every single day, it's important today to do the Parashat Aman, that we read it, that we believe that all our Parnasah comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in order that we should have all our tefillot answered Be'ezrat Hashem.